Hello YouTube and Wooper Club fans, I'm Fruit Taco, the couch of the Route 1 Burbs, and I'm very excited to be bringing you a feature match from Week 4 of WCL Season 12. This week, Steve, Chuck, and the Waterdeep Wobbuffets go up against Samantha and the Wooper Troopers. Steve was upset by the Quiet Majesty Week 1, but seems to be returning to form after pulling off a 6-0 last week. Meanwhile, the Wooper Troopers are trying to make up for some early losses, also coming off of a 6-0 last week. Which one of these teams will come out on top? Well, let's get into it and find out. The Wobbuffets are made up of Weavile, Roaring Moon, who cannot Terra, Gengar, Sandy Shocks, Quaquaval, Dragon Knight, who also cannot Terra, Scovillain, Klefki, Scizor, Orthworm, and Torkoal, and they'll be going up against Chien Pao, who cannot Terra, Iron Jugulus, Aqua Breed Tauros, Arcanine, Tinkaton, Annihilate Glamora, Armarouge, Iron Thorns, Vaporeon, and Bronzong on the side of the Troopers. Starting off with the speed tiers, the matchup is pretty close. The Troopers have the fastest overall Pokemon in Chien Pao, but the Wobbuffets have the second, third, and fifth fastest, giving them a slight edge there at the top. The Troopers, however, I'd say, have advantage in the middle tiers, with 4 Pokemon between the Wobbuffets, Sandy Shocks, and Quaquaval. Looking at their offenses, the Wobbuffets have some real strong options here. Dragon moves from Roaring Moon and Dragonite are spammable, and only resisted by Bronzong and Tinkaton. Sandy Shocks hits 7 out of 11 Pokemon super effectively with just its dual stabs, and Quaquaval looks amazing here too. With nothing that resists both water and fighting, and only 2 Pokemon that resist each stab, a Quaquaval sweep actually looks quite possible. Looking at the Troopers, this looks like one of the few times Chien Pao might have to stay behind. However, a well-played Annihilate could certainly make up for it, with both Fighting and Ghost being relatively good into the Wobbuffets. Tauros and Armarouge have dual stabs that only 1 Pokemon each can resist, opening up some potential late-game sweeps as well. I think on the whole, they'll be playing a slower game than the Wobbuffets, using Bronzong and Vaporeon to support the team, while they bring the Wobbuffets in range of a late-game push. The Wobbuffets look to be able to take a more aggressive approach, though, setting up and breaking through from the get-go, perhaps behind some screens of their own. I think I favor the Wobbuffets in this matchup, but I could definitely see the Troopers pulling off an upset here, so let's see how each coach chose to approach the matchup. Starting it off for the Wobbuffets is Roaring Moon. It's running just enough speed to outspeed Iron Jugulus, and with max attack investment, that booster energy is going to be boosting attack even further when it hits the field. I do like the fun Jaw Lock tech here to trap an opponent and maybe get some free Dragon Dances up against a more passive Pokemon. Next is Choice Specs Gengar, also EV'd to outspeed Jugulus, and running Terra Normal to flip its weaknesses in front of Annihilate. Shadow Ball is spammable, and Thunderbolt hits what Shadow Ball doesn't, giving it the freedom to run Trick and Will-O-Wisp as well. Moving on to Moxie Quaquaval, running Terra Flying Brave Bird along with Bulk Up, Close Combat, and Aqua Step, along with a Figgy Berry, which should give it time to set up or extra HP to fire off additional Brave Birds. Adamant Max Attack is going to let it hit hard, and while it's invested a lot in HP, it's got just enough speed to outspeed everything but Chien Pao and Scarfers after an Aqua Step. Scizor is up next, running a max defense set with standard Bullet Punch, U-Turn, Defog, and the not-so-standard counter. This should let it hit back at Iron Thorns, Tauros, or a Terastallized Annihilate while still being mostly supportive in build. Terrasteel Bullet Punch is strong, but with no attack investment, that's probably an emergency option I do not expect to see. Sandy Shocks is coming with just shy of max speed and a Choice Scarf, letting it outspeed max speed Tauros with a Scarf or a boost. Pretty standard moveset with Dual Stab, Volt Switch, and Rocks, and the ability to hit even harder with Terra Electric. Rounding out the team is Max Defense Light Clay Klefki, rocking Prankster Dual Screens and Thunder Wave, and then Steel Beam as its last move. This actually does 2 things. First, even with no investment, it one-shots Chien Pao, where Play Rough would do about 80%. And second, it can use it to knock itself out, giving a free switch to a setup sweeper behind screens. That's actually quite cool tech. I'm really impressed to see that here. Moving on to their opponents, the Wooper Troopers, we're starting off with fast, bulky Annihilate with Drain Punch, Rage Fist, Stealth Rock, and Final Gambit. It's built to accrue power on Rage Fist while healing with lefties and Drain Punch, but I do like Final Gambit as a way to get immediate advantage out of it in a pinch. Terra Ground lets it block Sandy Shocks in a pinch as well as potentially dodge a super effective attack, but I think it's a little bit of a niche type. Moving on to Arcanine, we've got another fast bulky set running Morning Sun, Will-O-Wisp, Terra Fairy boosted Play Rough, and Flamethrower. Has just enough speed to outspeed Quaquaval, but also looks to be a defensive answer to Roaring Moon. Next up is Max Special Defense Bronzong rocking lefties, dual screens, body press, and Ice Spinner, along with Terra Poison Levitate. Ice Spinner lets it hit Dragonite and Sandy Shocks as well as Roaring Moon, while Body Press gives an option for the Steel types. But I don't see a whole bunch of use for that Terra Poison aside from just being able to dodge some potential super effective hits. Also coming is Max Attack Scarfed Tauros, just outspeeding +1 Quaquaval. Close Combat is hard-hitting stab, while the signature Raging Bolt is a base 90 power stab water move that breaks screens, very useful against Klefki. Aquajet lets it pressure an opposing Scarfer, and Terra Dragon Outrage should let it punish a Dragonite switch-in with a good prediction. Vaporeon is running a mixed bulk set this week, with standard moves in Yawn, Surf, Wish, and Protect. Terra Ground lets it absorb an attack from Sandy Shocks and do over 75% back with Surf, but other than that, I expect it to mostly just be passing wishes around. And last up, we have a bulky Iron Thorns running enough speed to outspeed Adamant Dragonite, and with Booster Energy still boosting its physical attack. Dragon Dance will further boost Brick Break, Fire Punch, and Terra-boosted Stab Thunder Punches. This Pokemon could really get out of control if it can get a dance or two up on top of that Booster Energy boost. Well, that's what's coming to the match, so there's nothing left to do but jump into the battle itself. And, well, here we are. Looking at what came, Sandy Shocks looks absolutely amazing here for the Wobbuffets, with very spammable electric moves and the ability to destroy Iron Thorns on a predicted switch-in. Getting good use out of it and Gengar will be big, as the Troopers double Intimidate core could prove pretty troublesome for all the physical sweepers on the Wobbuffet side. Looking at the Wooper Troopers side, Iron Thorns looks to be a monster if that Sandy Shocks can be dealt with, and while those Intimidators are great, you can only take so many hits, so smart use of them is going to be key. Looking like the Wobbuffets have a very safe lead here in Sandy Shocks, well, perhaps we could see Bronzong and some early screens come out for the Troopers? Sandy Shocks does come out as well as Annihilate. And here, turn 1, they're just going to trade rocks. Of course, Scarfed Shocks has to hard switch into Klefki, perhaps hinting at a choice item, who's going to take very little from Rage Fist. Iron Thorn switches in for Annihilate, popping its booster energy, and it's going to be immune to this Thunder Wave. Steve doesn't waste time with his screen and goes right back to Shocks as Iron Thorn sets up a Dragon Dance. Thorns can't touch Shocks, though, even with its boost, so Bronzong comes in and is immune to the Earth power. Another hard switch instead of Volt Switch, hinting at the Choice Lock again as Scizor comes out and Reflect gets set up. Annihilate comes in behind the screen, and while Defog gets rid of Reflect and both hazards, it actually gives a Defiant boost to Annihilate. To avoid boosting Rage Fist, Steve just switches into Klefki, who is brought under half by that Rage Fist. Reflect gets set up for the Wobbuffets as the Troopers set their rocks back up, and Samantha makes an unfortunate switch here into Tauros, who's going to get paralyzed by Thunder Wave. We'd already seen Klefki try to paralyze Annihilate, so it was likely to try to do so again. Steve Chuck could have predicted that she'd try and dodge the Thunder Wave by going into Iron Thorns again, and then gone into something like Quaquaval himself, but he's in a good position already, so I don't think an aggressive play like that was very needed on his end. Whatever the case, though, Scarf Tauros is now paralyzed, which is huge, no longer being able to use that speed to keep those fast threats in check. Quaquaval now comes in and resists the Raging Bull, but it's going to be brought to about 2/3 health and is no longer behind a screen. But it's going to set up a bulk up as Vaporeon switch in, probably trying to yawn it out. Max roll on close combat does huge damage, but yawn will come out and limit the extent of the damage Quaquaval can do. Scizor switches in for the Drowsy Duck, and Tauros switches in for Vaporeon here, probably to take a potential attack. Arcanine then switches in, and after 2 Intimidates on the Scizor, U-turn is going to do barely anything, but it does bring in Sandy Shocks again. Bronzong is going to come out and is going to take a Volt Switch with that damage all but revealing the Choice Scarf on Shocks, who pivots into Gengar. Nothing wants to take a big Shadow Ball, which gets the 37% chance roll to KO, revealing the specs as Iron Thorns comes in. Gengar can't KO though, so Scizor switches in as Thorns gets a free Dragon Dance up. Perhaps fearing a potential close combat, Samantha goes straight for the KO with Fire Punch, meaning rocks are here to stay, but it brings Sandy Shocks back out. Not risking an overprediction, Earth Power is going to hit the incoming Annihilate, giving it a free Rage Fist boost. And with that boost, it's going to mean that Klefki is going to barely hang on after taking a Rage Fist and Rocks damage. Reflect gets set up as Klefki goes down to Drain Punch, and Annihilate is being left pretty healthy here as Gengar comes out. Steve chooses not to Terra, but Samantha does, meaning Annihilate is going to survive the Shadow Ball and KO back. Terra Normal Gengar had already been used to counter Annihilate in a match in the other conference this season, and if his opponent was aware of and expecting it, well, then for Steve, this was a coin flip of which attack to choose to be immune to. Unfortunately, Steve didn't pull the trigger on the Terra, and Gengar is KO'd, but it's brought Ape in range of a revenge kill from this Roaring Moon, at least. Tauros is going to come out to get an Intimidate off and easily takes the Jaw Lock, trapping both it and Roaring Moon. With the Intimidate, Steve is forced to Dragon Dance up as Tauros gets a huge close combat off even through that Reflect. After the dance and defense drop, Acrobatics easily KOs Tauros, but Arcanine comes in with another Intimidate. Steve switches into Quaquaval, which takes a chunk from Play Rough, but is just outside of range of eating its berry. Arcanine's going to outspeed and land a Will-O-Wisp, allowing it to easily take a close combat there from the Quaquaval. Steve is going to Terra here to live a Play Rough, but that actually means he no longer resists the Flamethrower that comes out and gets KO'd. If Samantha had gone for another super effective Play Rough, just thinking that the Quaquaval would stay water fighting, well, Quaquaval would have been no longer super effective and would have survived and gotten off about another 30% or so. But Samantha seems to have made an excellent prediction and went for Flamethrower instead, being no longer resisted and hitting outside of that Reflect. Well, now Sandy Shocks is going to come out again and nothing wants to take an Earth Power. Vaporeon is going to be sacked here to Earth Power, which is going to give Samantha a free switch into Annihilate. Earth Power brings Annihilate low, but can't KO, and Sandy Shocks finally goes down to a Rage Fist. Roaring Moons is on its last legs, but it's going to bring the incoming Arcanine very low with this Earthquake, even after the Intimidate. Samantha makes the safe play, doubling back out into Annihilate, though, sacking it so that she can just go back into Arcanine and get off a second Intimidate. Another EQ will bring it to one Mon left and on each team, but can Roaring Moon power through? No! Even after just one Intimidate, Steve needed a crit to take out Iron Thorns from where it was, and he does not get it, meaning that Iron Thorns tanks it out and wraps up the match for the narrow 1-0 victory for the Wooper Troopers. Man, what a great match from our coaches. Really impressive play by Samantha, keeping the right pieces around and healthy right up until the end. Sandy Shocks was a monster this game right up until the end too, though, but good use of Intimidate was able to stave off the rest of the Wobbuffets and eventually clinch that narrow victory. Thanks, as always, to both coaches for a fantastic match, and to you for watching. Check out the description for links to some of our coaches' channels where you can find more WCL content. Like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with more coverage of the Wooper Club League Season 12, and I will see you next week for another feature match.